Yeah, it was one of the commissions that I got from Festival Archipel in Geneva this year. They had a bespoke acousmonium and asked me to write two pieces, one for quintet and one for solo piano. The piece itself, the reason it's 32 channels is because the acousmonium that I was working on was 32 channels, and the actual number of pitches in the tape part is very much structurally related to the way the piece unfolds. For example, the piece exponentially introduces the pitches towards the middle point and then reduces them towards the end of the piece. And the actual choice of pitches themselves is on a logarithmic scale which spans the entire piano. So I tried to somehow translate the materials of the speakers and how the pitches related to the materials of the speakers into the structure of the piece itself. Rowan's a very old friend of mine, and we actually went to university together, and unbeknownst to us, we're actually at the same high school at the same time and had the same piano teacher, but he was a bit older. And we've been working together since the late 90s in various configurations. Most recently, we started experimenting with two keyboard works, some of which will be released on an Italian label actually in September on Superpang in Rome. And for this piece specifically, we did an improvisation where he was playing Super Collider and I was playing Revox, with the Super Collider frequencies going into the same room as I was doing room feedback onto the Revox. And so eventually we did this for a few days and we came up with something like 26 or 27 minutes of an electronics part. And then what I mean by the orchestration of the tape is that I then analysed the pitch structure which happened on the tape part in the improvisation with Rowan, and I guess formulated a pitch structure out of what came out of the room feedback and the Super Collider oscillators. Then, instead of just mirroring what's happening on the tape in the piano part, what I mean by directed improvisational algorithms is that I've been working a lot in my ensemble works about how to structure improvisation in a directed way through rules, basically, sort of performance rules. So you play this pitch a certain way with this dynamic, with this articulation, a certain number of times in a row, and then you have to change certain parameters. So with the traces of a mistake, what I'm thinking about is I'm responding to the frequencies on the tape, but there are only certain ways that I'm allowed to do it. I can't just improvise with the pitches that are on the tape. I have to do them in different orders and at different intensities and in different octaves and so forth. So there's quite a few little nuances in there, but well, I guess the clearest way to put it is that it's a kind of improvised accompaniment to a through-composed electronic piece. That's a very specific context where it's not every day someone asks you to write a piece for 32 channel acousmonium. And so, and as I was explaining, that has a direct influence on how the piece is structured and the selection of pitches, and also the rhythms that I use also. With the ensemble works, my favourite thing to do is actually, these days, just sit at the piano and work out harmonies. And my rhythmic instinct has generally been pretty natural. I'm very comfortable with rhythm, but with pitch and harmony and so forth, I need to be able to hear it. I need to hear the acoustic reality of the relationship between the frequencies. So when I work for ensemble works, I definitely try to work with the material itself as much as possible. I used to write a lot just at a desk with pen and paper without working on the piano. That was a way to kind of get out of being a pianist in a way, because that's so strongly involved in my physicality and my physical relationship to sound, that for years I was trying to kind of work in purely abstract terms and just work on a score without notation software or anything, just with calculations and pen and paper. But these days I'm much more interested in working with the acoustical reality of the materials and hearing the relationships. So it very much depends on what happens, what the commission is, what the context will be, and if I'm collaborating with someone else. For example, if I work with Jerome or Eric M, or my friend Eki, who's a violinist, we always are just in situ in the moment, working on the material together, trying to figure out the best outcomes with the materials at hand, or the resources at hand, I should say. For example, I've been in situations with symphony orchestras where there's no opportunity to change much. You only have an hour or two, if you're lucky, to actually hear the piece and have everyone play through it. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I worked a lot when I was at Schloss Solitude in 2018. I was working a lot with a group of musicians from Melbourne who all live in Berlin, and who I actually now wrote the second piece for Archipel for. Jonathan Helbron, Sam Dunscombe, Rebecca Lane and Judith Hammond. Actually, Judith was in Geneva, but the point being is that in those scenarios, these are already great musicians, and they're also quite interesting composers in their own right. So as a composer, for me to sort of sit there and say, play this, doesn't really make much sense. But at the same time, I do want to take responsibility for what's happening musically, and have quite a clear idea about what's going to happen most of the time. But without their participation in the creative process, I'm not able to get the same results. So, for example, the clarinet solo I wrote for Sam Thinning was based on these Horatio Radulescu multiphonics that he'd been working on for a piece for multiple clarinets that he presented at Mertz Music. And I took 3 of them and just based a whole piece around that. But so he gave me the information to be able to somehow make the piece. Also with Jonathan, writing for strings is also very tricky if you're not a string player, in terms of double stops and harmonics and so forth. So, he was able to really help me in terms of what sounds good on the bass and so forth. The piece I wrote for Jessica Rizzoti, that was very much based on me giving her directed improvisational instructions and improvising on the Revox, and then me going away and editing what the voice and the Revox material was, and then again orchestrating it with her voice afterwards. So yeah, it always changes. I'm very much into those collaborations, but these days I have to say I'm swinging back towards the more abstract, distanced composer performer thing, because I have quite specific things that I want to do coming up. So, and that's somehow a difficult thing when you think you've figured it out, but actually it always just shifts and you become interested in something else, and you just have to somehow change your strategy. There's a few things. Firstly, I thought that maybe it was a kind of weird scramble for everyone to kind of maintain a presence somehow during this period, and to keep to keep active and to stay productive. And I think in music, a lot of the time, because it's a temporal art form, really takes quite a lot of time to make something good. And I would have liked to have seen more research. I mean, I guess we haven't really heard what everyone kind of got up to during this period yet. I'm sure there's going to be a glut of lockdown records. So I tried to take it personally and as an opportunity to develop a lot of kind of just playing piano every day and practicing a lot more than I usually would. And I guess when I saw a lot of online activity, I'm personally very interested in how sound is transmitted in a space with speakers, instruments, energy, acoustics, and placement of sound. So the forum of online concerts for me didn't end up being so interesting for the most part. That said, there were some really nice things that I got to do as part of when my tour last year got cancelled when Europe opened up in September and I stayed until November. Half of my concerts got cancelled. I was able to do a few nice online things that actually kind of worked. But I think when you're given an opportunity to make your thing deeper and make it better, I think that's an important opportunity to try and capitalize on. I don't necessarily think it's a positive. I wouldn't frame it as a positive outcome of the pandemic because there's nothing really positive about it in that way. And there's a lot of kind of rhetoric in the press about how this is it's nice to spend more time with the kids or whatever. I'm sure people are going crazy, like not having their routine taken away from them. But creatively, certainly I personally found it, my music got a lot quieter for some reason. I think given my history at the beginning, I was kind of typecast as a bit of a noise bro, and now I'm very much like this kind of, I'm just trying to figure out new things, and a lot of it seems to tend towards a quieter dynamic and a more delicate sensibility, which is also in part to do with the pandemic because, I know quite a few people who died actually. I know about 6 people who've died in the last year. Plus a dear friend of mine got long COVID right at the beginning. So, it was a very stressful time for everyone. And for me personally, I try to just, music for me is the reason I kind of get up in the morning, and, it's given me a life, and I really try to just keep going no matter what, but not try and put stuff out there so much, but also, in kind of honour of those people who died somehow, because they were all musicians. So, it's kind of nice to be able to get up and make music and have that opportunity. As I was saying before, I really want to write large ensemble pieces again. I've kind of, for a while there, I was very much against the idea because I wanted to have this intimate relationship with the interpreters and somehow work with them in a very personal way. And like what happens with my work every 10 years or so, there's always a kind of about face, and I suddenly launch off in the other direction, and I'm very much involved in doing larger, longer, more ambitious works at the moment for large ensemble, and I'm getting back into writing for percussion, which I haven't written for in 8 or 9 years. For years I was writing at least 2 percussion works a year. At the moment I'm writing a piece for 15 percussionists that's going to go for an hour, and on top of usual kind of research at home and making albums and things like that. But I guess, I find the sensuality of sound quite important, and I find new ways of hearing quite important, because those are the things which make me feel better. So I try and kind of involve my research directly with those kind of fundamental things, you know, the sensuality of listening and hearing, and the physicality and the physical reactions of absorbing sound. And but also, you know, the importance of actually not just mimicking kind of things which work already and then doing another version of that, but, you know, trying to push myself to find new experiences that purely involve sound. I'm not one of these artists who's very good at kind of cross-genre work. I'm not really into visuals or kind of, you know, helping the sound through a kind of visual aspect. Or, I mean, I love cinema, and I have enjoyed working with film in the past, but I'm very much into just sound and music and how to make that a special, unique experience. So when you ask me what my future research is, that's a lifelong thing, really, actually. So.